Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Feliciano Live. We're here with Dr. Denise Applebaum. She's an assistant professor here at the Feliciano School of Business in the Department of Accounting and Finance. Today's topic is about using drones for internal and external auditing. We are going to progress through the interview, and as we do, if you have any questions, feel free to ask those questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. So the first question is, according to the Federal Aviation Administration, what are the current restrictions on the use of drones?
Well, the biggest current restriction on the use of drones is if you're using for commercial purposes, you need to have a remote pilot's license, which basically is a certification by the FAA that you've learned the necessary rules about using drones in the drone airspace. And regardless of whether you are a commercial or a hobbyist, there are rules you have to follow, such as the drone has to be registered with the FAA when you purchase it. Also, you cannot fly above 400 feet in the sky or around a building. It cannot be flown beyond visual line of sight. So you need to be able to see that drone at all times. You can only pilot one drone at a time. You cannot fly over people. You cannot fly a drone from a moving vehicle. And the biggest issue, and also not at nighttime. However, you can apply for a waiver, but most of the waivers that have been approved to date have only been for not flying at nighttime. So some entities are now getting approved for beyond visual line of sight, but it's on a very limited basis. So like energy companies using drones to monitor pipelines, they were approved in Colorado recently for that. And Kansas is looking at that also for some of their agricultural facilities. But basically, these are the major restrictions due to the fact that we also, you cannot fly near airports and areas where the president lives, for example. So Manhattan is largely off limits for flying a drone anywhere because of President Trump's residence.
For those who just joined us, we're here with Dr. Denise Applebaum. She's an assistant professor here at the Feliciano School of Business in the Department of Accounting and Finance. We're talking about drones and how they're being used for internal and external auditing. If you have any questions, feel free to ask those questions. As we go through the interview, we'll get to as many as we can. Next question is, what phases of the audit are suggested for drone use?
Okay, well, when I talk about using drones for auditing and accounting, I reference the idea that drones are ideal for tasks that are dull, dirty, dangerous, and where you want good data or improved data, so the 4 Ds. And in auditing and accounting, auditors and accountants often have to verify or do inventory counts in large warehouses or other physical or agricultural facilities. We have to inspect assets for their financial value. So the audit client may say a building is worth $20 million, and basically you have to, as an auditor and as an accountant, inspect that asset to make sure that the value, the integrity, that the aging of the building is appropriate for the value that the client is claimed that it's taking. Also, a big area that auditors work in is for government auditing and accounting is inspecting bridges. And this is where drones have been really highlighted recently to show great value in terms of the data they collect, and also able to allow more efficiency and effectiveness of the audit. So a bridge that is piloted by drone has 65% savings in the inspection process versus one that is inspected under current construction processes. So when I talk to the students and to clients about this, it's always about referencing that the drone really alleviates conditions where you have dull, dirty, dangerous tasks and where you can realize greater efficiency and effectiveness. And furthermore, you want to be able to keep an eye on the drone at all times. You want to pilot the drone as an auditor. So really, I call it as another data collection tool in the audit process.
For those who just joined us, we're here with Dr. Denise Applebaum. She's talking about drones for internal and external auditing. If you have any questions, feel free to ask those questions as we move through this interview. We actually do have a question.
Okay.
For the drones, who does the piloting for the drones?
Okay, right now it should be by the auditor or accountant who's in charge of the process, or if they've hired a service provider, that auditor or accountant needs to be next to the service provider the entire time of the drone piloting process. But basically, the auditor needs to be there to observe and make sure that the data is being collected directly to the receiver, and that they have control of the data being collected.
Okay, our next question is, do drones need to be equipped with specialized features, tools to become part of the auditing process?
Yes and no. So everyone's aware of drones being very heavily used for photography and video purposes, and most of the drones at least on the lower scale, that are available to hobbyists and commercial users are using drones with the cameras attached, or maybe the more expensive drones would have a camera attachment. However, when you get to the larger enterprise version of drones, that is where there's lots of possibilities and where a lot of the integration and business use comes in. So we have LiDAR scanners can be attached to a drone. I'm working with a local government entity right now. We're exploring the use of adding a gas spectrometer to our drone and sailing or flying that drone over a landfill to measure the emissions for various types of toxic fumes and gases which may be coming out of the landfill. So that gives you an idea of the type of use cases that are used in auditing and accounting. So we have to measure landfill gas measurements, at least on the government side.
Okay, we have another live question.
Okay.
How will the auditor know if a drone had made a mistake?
Well, the auditor has to be in control of the drone the whole time. So when you're talking about a mistake, I'm assuming you're talking about perhaps not accurately recording something. Well, yes, there's always this issue that perhaps the drone cannot capture. It's only going to be as good as the information that the drone is catching. So if you have a warehouse full of RFID tagged inventory and you have an RFID scanner on the drone, yes, so if the item is not scanned or not scanned by the drone, that would catch it. So you could compare that to the actual RFID data that you've collected on the other side of your spreadsheets. Or if you have a case where the item wasn't tagged at all, then that's the case where maybe the drone would see something, you have a picture of it, but there would be no RFID scan accompanying that item. So it's really a matter, you have to look at the drone data in correlation with the other data that's collected during the regular process in the warehouse, for example, that you would have as an auditor or accountant going into that inspection. So really, the drone's really doing the same task that the auditor did before, but the drone is allowing the auditor to do that more efficiently and effectively.
Okay, our next question is, what problems will drones help auditors resolve?
Well, basically, it helps us resolve kinds of tasks where it's been dangerous. So I always talk about in audit classes about auditors having to climb big oil reserve tanks, for example, or be on rooftops to look at assets, or inspect bridges, and if you're a government auditor or inspector. And so the drone alleviates some of the danger and the timing issues of some of these processes. And also the drone also helps us see better data, for example. So I also want to show a video where, even the RFID tagged inventory in a warehouse, that those items need to be scanned close to a scanner. So either it's a matter of the drone going to those items or the items being brought down to the auditor or the accountant, which is a more lengthy process. So it's easier to fly a drone up to the top of a warehouse rack shelf than as opposed to taking a forklift and bringing it down so the auditor can measure everything.
Next question is, how will the inclusion of drones in the auditing process affect jobs?
Well, this gets very interesting. I would say initially that it will not affect too many jobs. It may change the nature of the kind of work that we do as auditors and accountants. So I like to use an analogy that the auditor would now come into an engagement with a computer notebook in one hand and a drone toolbox in another hand. So the idea is that the drone will help us collect better data more efficiently, but then we'll be tasked more as auditors and accountants to actually do more analysis and more interesting observations with the audit process, as opposed to being bogged down with trying to just collect the data.
The next question, how will the drones used differ from drones purchased for recreational use?
Well, this is where basically the recreational use drones are primarily for video purposes and picture-taking purposes. When we talk about using drones for auditing and accounting, we're starting to look at different types of sensors. Like I mentioned, the RFID sensors. So that's one sensor that has to be bolted on. We're talking about LiDAR sensors for agriculture or drainage issues, gas spectrometer readings. Any type of sensor that is available could be attached to a drone and brought close to the location that needs to be measured. So that's where we see great potential for use of drones beyond just the photography, although that's a great use of the drones as well.
And our final question is, how long will it take for drones to become fully implemented in the auditing process?
Well, this is where that gets problematic. So the FAA is still trying to establish, they're still trying to figure out if there's ways to integrate the fact that the drones are now part of this overall airspace which they have control over. Plus we have this interagency issue with the government. Plus we also have the auditing standards, which seem to be the least of the problems right now. So I would say anywhere from 2 to 7 years. So that's why Many businesses are sort of in the piloting stage of looking at using drones in their business processes and programs because of this inability to exactly be sure when exactly the regulations may change.
Okay, we have a live question.
Okay.
What qualifications would an auditor need to professionally fly a drone, i.e. licenses, certifications?
Okay, the auditor would need to become a certified remote pilot, which means they have to take a short exam with the FAA, and that has to be renewed every 2 years with updated pilot exam questions. So that's a fairly straightforward process. It's not like taking the CPA exam. And of course, the auditor or accountant would need to also have practice the skills of taking these using the drone. Plus, I would suggest that although it's not required by the FAA, that they obtain drone insurance. That would be for any businesses undertaking drone usage, because actually, in many business policies now will bar the use of drones or bar covering drone incidents, whether something happened to you from a drone or whether you caused an incident with a drone.
Great. We want to thank Dr. Applebaum for her time, as well as for those who just joined us. We're here next week at 1 o'clock on Thursday talking about the impact of hurricanes on the hotel and restaurant industry. Until then, we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much for your time and your interest.